The fire crackles and spits as Elena adds another log, her movements precise despite the tremor in her hands, not from fear, but from the latest bloodletting. 3 vials this morning alone, drawn from the pale network of scars that map her forearms like a constellation of sacrifice. Each mark tells a story of someone saved, someone pulled back from the brink of an existence that hovers between life and death. She moves to the rough-hewn table where her medical instruments gleam in the firelight. Even here, in this primitive cabin that time forgot, she cannot abandon the tools of her trade. The scalpels, needles, and glass vials are arranged with surgical precision, a ritual that grounds her when everything else feels like madness. The wind shifts, and with it comes something that makes her spine straighten. A presence, ancient and patient like a predator that has never known true hunger because it has never known denial. Elena's fingers trace the leather-bound journal beside her instruments, its pages filled with observations that would sound like fever dreams to any rational mind. Detailed notes on blood composition, cellular regeneration rates, and the impossible alchemy that occurs when her cursed blood meets that of others afflicted with the same darkness. She has become part physician, part alchemist, and part something else entirely, something she doesn't yet have words for. The cabin door rattles against its frame, though the wind has suddenly died. "I know you're there," she calls softly, her voice steady despite the way her heart hammers against her ribs. "I've been expecting you." Silence stretches between heartbeats. Then comes the sound of footsteps on the wooden porch, measured, deliberate, like a funeral march played in slow motion. Each step seems to echo through her bones, awakening memories of that desperate night 1 year ago, when she knelt in the snow and begged the darkness for just enough time to understand what was killing her. The latch clicks without the door being touched. Elena doesn't turn around as the presence fills the space behind her. She can feel the temperature drop, see her breath mist in the suddenly frigid air. Instead, she continues cataloging the contents of her latest successful cure, her handwriting neat and clinical. "Subject recovered full cognitive function within 6 hours, she murmurs as she writes, as if she's alone. Cellular regeneration exceeded all previous results. The blood ratio appears to be improving with each iteration. Fascinating," comes a voice like velvet over steel, cultured and patient, and older than the mountains themselves. Though I must admit, this is not quite the scene I anticipated finding. Now Elena does turn, slowly, deliberately. She sets down her pen with the same care she once used when preparing for surgery, when a patient's life hung in the balance and every movement mattered. Lucien Dracul stands in her doorway like something carved from shadow and starlight. Tall, imposing, with the kind of beauty that speaks of careful breeding and careful feeding. His dark hair is longer than fashion dictates, framing a face that might have been carved by Renaissance masters if they'd known how to capture the essence of barely contained violence. He wears modern clothes, a long black coat that speaks of London tailors. But there's something timeless about him that makes the very air seem older. His eyes, though, his eyes are what stop her breath, deep amber, almost gold, and ancient in a way that makes her feel like an insect under glass. "Your Majesty," she says, inclining her head with just enough respect to avoid immediate death, but not enough to suggest surrender. "You're punctual. I appreciate that in business partners." Something flickers across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. Business partners? How delightfully optimistic. His gaze sweeps the cabin, taking in the rows of empty vials, the medical equipment, the careful organization of what should be a desperate woman's final refuge. "I came to collect a debt, Dr. Thorne, a soul specifically. Yours." Elena gestures to the chair across from her small table. "Please, sit. We have things to discuss." He doesn't move. "I think you misunderstand the nature of our arrangement." "Do I?" Elena reaches for one of the filled vials, holding it up so the firelight catches the deep crimson liquid within. "Tell me, Your Majesty, when was the last time you encountered blood that could cure your curse rather than spread it?" The silence that follows is profound. Lucian's eyes fix on the vial with an intensity that makes Elena's skin prickle. For the first time since he entered, she senses something other than predatory confidence in his stillness. Impossible, he breathes. Elena sets the vial down with deliberate care. A year ago, you gave me time to prepare for death. Instead, I discovered something that changes everything. She meets his ancient gaze without flinching. The question now is, what are you willing to trade for it? The Vampire King's laugh is soft, dangerous, and entirely without humor. My dear doctor, he says, finally moving into the cabin with fluid grace, I think you vastly overestimate your bargaining position. Lucian settles into the chair with the liquid grace of a predator who has never doubted his place at the apex of every food chain. His amber eyes never leave Elena's face as he studies her with the patience of something that has had centuries to perfect the art of reading human souls. You speak of bargaining, he says, his voice carrying the weight of aristocratic authority. Yet you sit before me in a cabin that reeks of desperation. His gaze drifts meaningfully to the constellation of scars mapping her forearms. Tell me, doctor, how many times have you bled yourself in the past week alone? Elena's fingers unconsciously brush the fresh puncture marks hidden beneath her sleeves. 17, she answers without hesitation. 3 major extractions, 14 smaller samples for testing. She meets his stare with clinical detachment. The work requires sacrifice. The work. Lucian leans back, and something in his expression shifts, not softening but sharpening into a different kind of focus. Show me your ordinary day, Dr. Thorne. I find myself curious about how the woman who should have died in my arms 12 months ago now speaks to me of cures. Elena rises, moving to the wall where a detailed chart tracks her daily routine with the obsessive precision of someone clinging to structure in a world gone mad. 5 a.m., blood extraction and documentation. 6 a.m., analysis and notation. 7 a.m., testing cellular regeneration rates. Her finger traces the meticulous schedule. Breakfast, if I remember. More often I don't. She turns to face him, noting how he sits perfectly still. No fidgeting, no unconscious movements that mark the living. 8 a.m. through noon, refinement processes. I've learned that temperature affects potency. Altitude matters. Even the phase of the moon influences the cure's effectiveness. A bitter smile touches her lips. Funny what you discover when death gives you a deadline. And afternoons. Lucian's question holds something Elena can't quite identify. Professional interest, perhaps, from one expert to another. Preparation for the night's work. She moves to the window, pulling aside the heavy curtain to reveal a view of the snow-covered valley below. They come after dark, you know. The ones who've heard whispers about the mad English doctor hiding in the mountains. The ones your curse has touched but not yet claimed. Lucian goes very still. Come here? To you? Last night it was a merchant from Brasov. His daughter, maybe 8 years old, burning with fever and crying tears of blood. Elena's voice remains steady, but her knuckles whiten where she grips the window frame. The night before, a family from one of the villages to the west. 3 children, a grandmother, all of them bearing the marks. She turns back to him, and for the first time Lucian sees something fierce and uncompromising blazing in her dark eyes. Do you want to know what my ordinary world looks like, Your Majesty? It looks like a never-ending parade of people you've marked for death, people I can save. The Vampire King rises with fluid precision, closing the distance between them until Elena can smell something like winter midnight and old copper. You speak as though I am some indiscriminate plague-bearer, he says softly, and there's danger in the careful control of his voice. As though I do not choose each mark with purpose. Purpose. Elena doesn't retreat, though every instinct screams at her to step back. What purpose justifies a 8-year-old girl bleeding from her eyes? Survival, Lucian says simply. Mine. My people's. The balance that keeps far worse things than vampires from walking this earth. His hand moves faster than human sight, coming to rest against the window frame beside her head. You think me a monster, Dr. Thorne. You're not wrong, but I am a necessary monster, Elena studies his face, the sharp cheekbones, the mouth that speaks of both cruelty and unexpected gentleness. And what if there was another way? What if the curse you've spent centuries wielding like a scalpel could become an actual cure instead? Something flickers across Lucian's features, so quick she almost misses it. Longing, perhaps, or hope. Then it's gone, buried beneath centuries of careful control. "You assume I haven't considered such possibilities," he murmurs. "That in 1,000 years of existence, the thought of redemption has never occurred to me. But you've never had this before." Elena reaches for another filled vial, holding it between them like a talisman. Blood that doesn't just resist your curse, it reverses it, completely. The silence stretches taut as a bowstring. Outside, wind howls through the mountains, but inside the cabin, the only sound is the soft crackle of the fire and 2 heartbeats, one mortal, one ancient and impossibly slow. "My ordinary world," Elena continues quietly, "involves saving lives you've marked for ending. Every dawn brings new possibilities for healing. Every sunset brings fresh hope." She pauses, letting the weight of her words settle between them. "The question is, what does your ordinary world bring you, Lucian? And are you prepared to consider that it might not have to be ordinary anymore?" Lucian's hand remains pressed against the window frame, but Elena watches something shift in his expression, a crack in the mask of controlled authority he's worn like armor for centuries. The silence stretches between them until it feels brittle enough to shatter. Then the sound reaches them both, hoofbeats in the distance, growing closer through the mountain pass. Elena's breath catches. "No, not tonight." "Expecting company, Dr. Thorne." Lucian's voice carries a dangerous edge, but his amber eyes have already shifted toward the door with predatory focus. The hoofbeats multiply, not one horse, but several, moving fast through the treacherous mountain terrain. Elena rushes to the window, peering through the darkness until she spots them. Torches bobbing like fireflies against the snow, riders pushing their mounts harder than the narrow path should allow. "Desperation," she whispers, recognizing the reckless pace. "Something's gone wrong." Lucian moves beside her with fluid silence, and Elena realizes he can see far more clearly than she can. His entire posture has changed, no longer the patient negotiator, but something ancient and alert. 3 riders, 2 adults, 1 child. The smaller figure. He pauses, and when he continues, his voice carries an odd note. "The child is dying." Elena's medical training overrides every other consideration. She's already moving toward her instruments, checking vial levels, preparing for what she knows will be another desperate attempt to cheat death. How long do they have? Minutes, perhaps less. Lucian watches her swift preparations with something like fascination. "You would treat them? Even knowing what it costs you?" "That's not a question." Elena's hands move with practiced efficiency, drawing fresh blood into sterilized vials. The familiar ritual grounds her even as her heart races. That's never been a question. The hoofbeats reach the cabin. Voices rise in the night, a man shouting in Romanian, a woman weeping, and underneath it all, the terrible silence of a child too weak to cry. Elena recognizes the sounds. She's heard them too many times over the past year. "Dr. Thorne!" The man's voice cracks with desperation as boots pound across the wooden porch. "Please, we heard. The stories about the Englishwoman who can heal." The door bursts open without ceremony. A middle-aged man stumbles inside carrying a boy of perhaps 10, the child's body limp and burning with fever. Behind them, a woman Elena recognizes, Maria, from the village of Sinaia, whose husband she treated 3 months ago. "Please," Maria gasps, her face streaked with tears and exhaustion. "My nephew, the sickness came so fast we couldn't." Her words die as she notices Lucian standing motionless in the shadows. The temperature in the cabin plummets. The man holding the sick child goes rigid, his eyes widening as some primal instinct recognizes the predator in their midst. Even the dying boy seems to sense it, a whimper escaping his cracked lips. Elena steps between them and Lucian without hesitation. "Put the boy on the table. Quickly, the shadow man," Maria whispers. her voice barely audible. The one from the old stories. Ignore him, Elena commands, though she can feel Lucian's presence like ice against her spine. Focus on the child. The man, Maria's brother, Elena realizes, carefully lays the boy on her work table. The child's skin burns with fever, his breathing shallow and rapid. Dark veins map his throat and temples, and when his eyes flutter open, they're clouded with the telltale signs of the curse's final stages. Elena has seen this too many times, but it never gets easier. Her hands move automatically, checking pulse points, examining the progression of symptoms. How long since onset? 2 days, the man croaks, maybe less. He was playing, laughing, and then… The fever struck like lightning, Maria finishes. Just like the stories say. Like something marked him. Elena doesn't look at Lucian, but she feels his attention sharpen. Her hands shake slightly as she reaches for a prepared vial. Not from fear now, but from the weakness that follows each bloodletting. She's pushed herself too far today, extracted too much, but the child is dying, and that's the only calculation that matters. This will help, she tells them, preparing to administer the cure. But you need to hold him steady. Wait. Lucian's voice cuts through the cabin like a blade. Everyone freezes. The Vampire King steps forward, his movements deliberate and precise, until he's close enough to study the dying child. Something in his expression has changed again, not the crack Elena saw earlier, but something deeper, something that might be recognition. This mark, he says quietly, his gaze fixed on the dark veins spreading across the boy's skin. I did not place it. Elena's blood runs cold. What do you mean? Lucian's amber eyes meet hers, and for the first time since he entered her cabin, she sees something that might be genuine concern. Someone else is using my curse, Dr. Thorne. Someone who lacks both my precision and my restraint. He pauses, the weight of centuries evident in his voice. Your ordinary world just became very dangerous indeed. Elena's hand freezes halfway to the vial, the implications of Lucian's words hitting her like a physical blow. Someone else? Her voice barely rises above a whisper, but the terror in it makes Maria clutch her brother's arm. The dying boy convulses on the table, his small body arching as whatever poison courses through his veins intensifies. Elena's medical training wars with a sudden, paralyzing uncertainty that feels foreign after months of decisive action. If this isn't Lucian's mark, if there's something else out there, something worse, then what is she really treating? What has she been treating all these months? Please, the man begs, his voice cracking. Whatever you're talking about, whatever this means, he's dying. You have to help him. Elena stares at the vial in her hands, the deep crimson liquid that has become her salvation and her obsession. But doubt creeps in like frost, freezing her certainty. What if her cure doesn't work against this new threat? What if administering it makes things worse? She's operated on faith and desperation for so long that the possibility of being wrong, truly, catastrophically wrong, paralyzes her. The patterns are different, Lucian continues, leaning closer to examine the child with clinical detachment. Cruder, more violent. Whoever did this lacks understanding of the curse's true nature. His amber eyes find Elena's. Your blood may not respond as expected. The words hit Elena like ice water. For 12 months, she's defined herself by her ability to heal, to transform death into life through careful sacrifice and endless experimentation. It's become more than purpose. It's become identity. Without it, what is she but a woman waiting to die in an isolated cabin, playing at medicine while the world burns around her? Her hands shake visibly now. The weakness from today's bloodletting combines with this crushing uncertainty until she can barely hold the vial steady. What if she's been fooling herself? What if her success rate has been luck, not skill? The thought that she might lose this child, that her cure might fail when it's needed most, threatens to shatter something fundamental inside her. Doctor? Maria's voice seems to come from very far away. Please, you're scaring me. Elena looks down at the boy's face, so pale it's nearly translucent, and sees her younger brother Thomas in those fevered features. The same age, the same desperate struggle against something too large and dark to fight. She failed Thomas. She knelt by his bedside and watched him die while her medical knowledge proved utterly useless against the curse ravaging his small body. "I don't know if this will work," she admits, the words torn from somewhere deep and raw. "I thought I understood it, but if there are others, if the curse can be changed, corrupted—" Her voice breaks. What if I make it worse? The admission costs her everything. She's spent a year building herself into something useful, something necessary, someone who could stand between the innocent and the darkness. But facing the possibility that her understanding is incomplete, that her cure might be useless against this new threat, reduces her to what she's always feared she truly is, a failure hiding in the mountains. Lucian watches her with an expression she can't read. "Fear is not unreasonable, Dr. Thorne. What you've accomplished should not be possible. What you're considering now, treating an unknown variant of a curse you barely understand, is extraordinarily dangerous. Then what do you suggest?" Elena's question comes out sharper than intended, desperation making her voice harsh. "Let him die. Add another child to the list of lives I couldn't save. I suggest," Lucian says quietly, "that you remember why you began this work." Elena's breath catches. She thinks of that first night, kneeling in the snow and begging for time. Not for her own life. She'd already accepted that forfeit, but for the chance to understand, to find meaning in the curse that took Thomas. Every vial of blood she's given, every patient she's treated, has been an act of defiance against the helplessness that nearly destroyed her. The boy gasps, a sound like breaking glass, and Elena sees his life slipping away while she hesitates. "The blood works," she says, more to herself than anyone else. "It has to work. It's all I have." But even as she prepares to administer the cure, doubt gnaws at her. What if Lucian is right about the dangers? What if she's about to poison a dying child with her own cursed blood? The responsibility feels crushing, made worse by the presence of the Vampire King, whose very existence reminds her how little she truly understands about the forces she's trying to combat. Her hand trembles as she approaches the boy, cure ready but certainty shattered. Everything she's built her new life around, the careful schedule, the meticulous documentation, the growing confidence in her abilities, crumbles in the face of this unknown threat. She realizes with terrible clarity that she's about to discover whether she's truly a healer or just a desperate woman playing at powers she was never meant to possess. Elena's hand hovers over the dying boy's lips, the vial trembling between her fingers. The weight of uncertainty presses against her chest like a stone, but beneath it, something else stirs. The same fierce determination that drove her to these mountains in the first place. "I came here to die," she whispers, more to herself than the desperate family watching her every movement. "But I found something else instead." She tilts the vial, letting 3 careful drops fall onto the boy's cracked lips. The crimson liquid seems to glow in the firelight, and Elena holds her breath as she watches for any sign of reaction. The child's breathing remains shallow, his pulse thready and weak. "More," Maria pleads. "Give him more." But Elena forces herself to wait, counting heartbeats, watching for the telltale signs she's learned to recognize. The cure has never been instant. It works slowly, carefully, rebuilding what the curse has torn apart cell by cell. Then she sees it, the slightest deepening of the boy's breath. The dark veins beneath his skin seem to pause in their relentless spread. "It's working," she breathes, and the relief nearly buckles her knees. She administers another dose, then another, each drop measured with the precision of someone who understands that too much could be as deadly as too little. The boy's fever breaks with startling suddenness, sweat beading on his forehead as his breathing steadies. Maria sobs with relief, clutching her brother's hand as color returns to the child's cheeks. "Thank you," she whispers. "Thank you, doctor." But Elena barely hears the gratitude. She's staring at Lucian, whose expression has shifted from skeptical observation to something approaching wonder. The Vampire King steps closer to the recovering child, his nostrils flaring slightly as he takes in some scent she cannot detect. Impossible, he murmurs. The foreign elements, they're being purged completely. Your blood didn't just heal him, it cleansed him of something that should have been beyond any cure. Elena feels the last of her old certainties crumble away. The careful world she's built in this cabin, controlled, documented, understood, has just revealed itself to be far larger and more dangerous than she ever imagined. If there are others out there corrupting Lucien's curse, creating variants that shouldn't exist, then her isolated healing practice is no longer enough. How many others? She asks, though part of her fears the answer. I don't know, Lucien admits, and the uncertainty in his ancient voice chills her. But if someone has learned to replicate and alter my work. He trails off, but Elena can see the calculations behind his amber eyes. You cannot remain here, Dr. Thorne. The words hit her like a physical blow. This cabin has been her sanctuary, her laboratory, her entire world for 12 months. Every surface holds memories of small victories, of lives saved and deaths cheated. The thought of leaving it feels like abandoning everything she's fought to become. This is my home, she protests, but even as she says it, she knows the argument is hollow. This is a target, Lucien corrects with brutal honesty. Whoever is creating these corrupted marks will eventually trace the cures back to their source. When they do, they'll find you alone and defenseless. Maria and her brother have been listening with growing alarm. What does this mean? The man asks. Are there others, like our boy? Others who might need... Many others, Elena says quietly, the truth settling over her like a mantle she's not sure she's ready to wear. And if they're spread across the mountains, hidden in villages I can't reach. She looks around her cabin one last time, at the carefully organized vials, the detailed charts tracking her progress, the small bed where she's collapsed in exhaustion after countless nights of healing. It represents everything she's built from the ashes of her old life, but it also represents limitation, safety, isolation. The boy on her table stirs, his eyes fluttering open with the clarity of genuine health. He looks up at her with the confusion of a child who doesn't understand why strange adults are staring at him with such intensity. Mama, he whispers, reaching for Maria. I'm here, little one, she soothes, gathering him into her arms. You're going to be fine. Elena watches the reunion with a mixture of joy and growing resolve. This child will live. He'll grow up, perhaps never knowing how close he came to death. But there are others out there, dozens, maybe hundreds, who won't be so fortunate if she remains hidden in her mountain retreat. If I leave here, she says to Lucien, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she's contemplating. If I abandon everything I've built, what then? Where would we even begin? Lucien's smile holds no warmth, but there's something like approval in his eyes. We begin by finding the source of these corrupted marks. And then, Dr. Thorne, we discover just how far your impossible blood can reach. Elena takes a final look at her sanctuary, then begins gathering supplies with swift efficiency. There is no going back now. Tests and allies. The mountain path proves treacherous even by moonlight, winding through ice-slicked rocks that would challenge an experienced climber in daylight. Elena stumbles for the third time in as many minutes, her hands raw from gripping frozen stone, her medical bag a constant weight against her shoulder. Behind her, Maria's brother, Andre, she's learned, carries the still weak boy, while Maria herself struggles to keep pace. Only Lucien moves with perfect grace, his steps finding purchase on surfaces that seem to crumble under everyone else's weight. Occasionally he pauses, amber eyes scanning the darkness with inhuman precision, but he offers no assistance to the struggling mortals. Elena is beginning to understand this as a test, not of her cure, which has already proven itself, but of her commitment to the path she's chosen. Where exactly are we going? She gasps during a brief rest, her breath forming clouds in the bitter air. The village of Rasinari, Andre answers before Lucien can respond. 3 days south, there are others, like my nephew. Many others. Elena's blood chills. How many? 15, perhaps 20 children. maybe more by now. Maria's voice breaks slightly. The sickness spreads faster there, different than the old stories warned us about. Lucian's expression darkens. Show me. From her coat, Maria produces a small object wrapped in cloth. A pendant, Elena realizes, made of blackened silver and etched with symbols that seem to writhe in the moonlight. The moment Lucian sees it, his entire posture changes. The controlled composure that has defined him since arriving at her cabin cracks completely. Where did you find this? His voice carries undertones that make the surrounding pine trees seem to lean away. Around my nephew's neck, André whispers. It appeared the night he fell sick. We thought, the old women said it might be protection. It is not protection. Lucian's fingers hover over the pendant without quite touching it. This is a perversion of sacred symbols. Someone has taken the original markers and twisted them into something obscene. Elena studies the etchings more closely, her medical training urging her to approach it like any other diagnostic tool. The symbols appear to be layered, newer markings carved over older ones with violent, jagged strokes. It's like a disease that's evolved, she murmurs. Something took the original curse and corrupted it into something worse. Precisely. Lucian finally lifts the pendant, and Elena notices his hands smoke slightly where they contact the silver. These are the work of someone who understands enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be precise. The curse bleeds beyond its intended targets, affecting anyone in proximity. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. If the corrupted marks can spread indiscriminately, targeting children without regard for whatever cosmic balance originally governed Lucian's system, then the isolated cases she's been treating represent only the beginning of something catastrophic. We need to move faster, she decides, pushing herself upright despite the exhaustion that comes from today's bloodletting. But the moment she stands, the world tilts dangerously. She's given too much of herself already, and they haven't even reached the first village yet. Strong hands catch her before she falls, not Lucian's ice-cold touch, but warm, calloused fingers. André steadies her with gentle efficiency, his eyes kind despite the terror of the night's revelations. You saved my nephew, he says simply. Whatever happens next, we stand with you. Maria nods firmly. The healer who works miracles should not walk alone into darkness. Elena feels something shift inside her chest, a warmth she hasn't experienced since losing Thomas. For 12 months, she's fought this battle in complete isolation, defining herself by her solitary struggle against the curse. The idea that others might choose to join that fight voluntarily, without coercion or payment, seems almost impossible to believe. But Lucian watches this exchange with growing urgency. Touching as this is, we cannot afford sentiment. If these corrupted marks are spreading as rapidly as you suggest, time is a luxury we do not possess. He gestures toward the path ahead, where Elena can now see lights flickering in the distance. Not the warm glow of hearth fires, but the harsh glare of torches and panic. Even from here, she can hear voices raised in fear and confusion. What you've accomplished in your mountain sanctuary represents the first stage of understanding, Lucian continues. But the enemy we face has evolved beyond your careful, controlled experiments. They create chaos where you bring order. They corrupt where you heal. Elena forces herself to focus despite her physical weakness. Then we learn their methods. We adapt. She looks at the frightened family who have chosen to follow her into unknown dangers, and we save who we can along the way. The boy in André's arms stirs, reaching small fingers toward Elena with the trust that only children possess. "Angel lady," he whispers in heavily accented English, the words taught by his aunt during the long journey. Elena takes his small hand in hers, feeling the steady pulse that her blood made possible. Whatever tests lie ahead in that torchlit village, whatever enemies wait in the darkness beyond, she will not face them as the isolated woman who once knelt in the snow begging for death. She has allies now. The real work begins. The torches grow brighter as they descend toward Rasanari, but the sounds reaching them from the village speak of barely controlled chaos. Elena can distinguish individual voices now, mothers calling for children, men shouting orders that seem to go unheeded, and underneath it all, a wailing that makes her blood run cold. She recognizes that particular note of grief. She's heard it echoing through hospital corridors at 3 a.m, when families gather around beds that hold more death than life. "We should approach carefully," Lucian murmurs, his supernatural senses clearly picking up details that remain hidden from the rest of them. Fear makes humans unpredictable. If they see us emerging from the darkness, particularly if they see me, they may not pause to listen before acting. Elena adjusts the weight of her medical bag, feeling the clink of vials against each other like a familiar prayer. She's checked and rechecked her supplies during the descent, 17 doses of the cure, enough concentrated blood to treat perhaps 20 cases if she's careful with the measurements. But if Andre's estimates are accurate, she'll need more than double that amount. "How many more vials can you produce tonight?" Lucian asks, as if reading her thoughts. The question forces Elena to confront the mathematics of her own limitations. Each vial requires roughly 8 ounces of blood. She's learned through painful trial and error that smaller amounts don't carry sufficient potency for advanced cases. At her current level of depletion, she might manage 1 more extraction before risking unconsciousness. 2 if she's willing to gamble with her life. Not enough, she admits. Not nearly enough. Maria shifts her nephew to her other arm, the boy having grown heavy with the deep sleep of healing. What if we can't save them all? The question hangs in the frigid air like an accusation. Elena has spent 12 months defining success by her perfect record. Every patient treated successfully, every dose carefully measured and administered with precision. The possibility of triage, of choosing who lives and dies based on finite resources, takes her back to those horrific early days of her medical training, when the sheer volume of need threatened to crush her idealism entirely. "We save who we can," she says finally, but the words taste like failure. Children first, the youngest cases, the ones with the best chance of full recovery. Lucian stops walking so abruptly that the rest of them nearly collide with him. His amber eyes reflect the torchlight with predatory intensity as he tilts his head, listening to something beyond their range. "They're burning the infected," he says with cold precision. "I can smell the smoke, the flesh. The villagers have decided that fire will stop the spread." Elena's stomach lurches. She's seen fear drive people to desperate measures before, but the image of terrified parents watching their children burn rather than risk further contagion strikes her as a particular kind of hell. "We have to stop them." "Do we?" Lucian's question carries no malice, only brutal pragmatism. If the corrupted curse is indeed spreading through proximity, containment might be the only rational response. Your cure is limited, but fire is abundant. The casual way he discusses mass immolation as a viable strategy reminds Elena forcibly that for all his assistance, Lucian remains fundamentally inhuman. 1,000 years of existence have given him perspectives that make individual deaths seem insignificant against larger patterns of survival and destruction. Andre makes a sound of pure horror. "My sister lives there. Her children—" He doesn't finish the sentence, but the implications drive him forward with renewed desperation. Soon they're all half running down the treacherous path, Elena's earlier exhaustion forgotten in the face of approaching tragedy. The outskirts of Rasanari come into view, a cluster of wooden houses with thatched roofs normally quaint in their mountain simplicity. But tonight, the village center glows with the wrong kind of light. Elena can see figures moving around what appears to be an enormous pyre, and the smoke carries scents that turn her medical training into a curse. She knows exactly what burning human flesh smells like, and the knowledge threatens to empty her stomach onto the frozen ground. There's still time, she tells herself as much as the others. If they've only just started, if we can convince them to stop. But even as she speaks, she's running calculations that offer no comfort. If 20 children are infected, and she can only produce enough cure for a fraction of that number, what then? How does she choose? What algorithm could possibly determine which young life deserves salvation over another? Lucian appears beside her with inhuman silence. "This is what I meant about the enemy we face," he says quietly. They don't just corrupt the curse, they corrupt everything it touches. Hope becomes desperation, healing becomes selection, order becomes chaos. Elena grips her medical bag tighter, feeling the weight of inadequate supplies and impossible choices. Below them, the pyre burns higher, and she knows that within minutes, she'll discover whether her mountain exile has truly prepared her for the broader war now beginning. The real test approaches, and she has never felt less ready for anything in her life. The ordeal begins. The screaming reaches them first. Elena breaks into a run despite her weakness, her medical bag bouncing against her hip as she plunges down the final slope toward Rasinari. Behind her she can hear Andre's panicked breathing, Maria's whispered prayers, but these sounds fade beneath the cacophony rising from the village center, not just the roar of flames, but human voices raised in anguish and terror. The scene that greets them defies her worst imaginings. The enormous pyre she glimpsed from above towers 15 feet high, constructed of furniture, broken carts, anything combustible the villagers could gather. But it's not bodies burning atop it, not yet. Instead, she sees children bound with rope and arranged at the base of the structure, perhaps a dozen small forms writhing against their restraints, while adults with torches argue violently just beyond the fire's reach. They haven't burned them yet. Elena gasps, hope flaring in her chest. We're not too late. But even as she speaks, she's taking in details that chill her more than the mountain air. Every child bears the same corruption, blackened veins visible beneath pale skin, those terrible silver pendants hanging from their necks like death sentences. The marks pulse with unnatural rhythm, synchronized across all the infected in a way that suggests something far more sophisticated than random contagion. It's not just spreading, she whispers to Lucian. It's coordinated, orchestrated, his amber eyes narrow as he surveys the scene. Someone wanted these children marked simultaneously, but why? The answer begins to form in Elena's mind, just as one of the torch-bearing villagers notices their approach. The man, broad-shouldered and wild-eyed with exhaustion, raises his flame like a weapon. "Stay back," he shouts in heavily accented English, clearly recognizing them as foreigners. "The curse spreads. We burn it out before it takes the whole village." Elena steps forward with her hands raised, medical training overriding fear. "I'm a doctor. I can help them." "Doctors cannot cure hell's work," another villager spits, but Elena catches the tremor in his voice. These aren't monsters reveling in cruelty. They're terrified parents facing an enemy they don't understand. Maria pushes past Elena, her nephew still cradled in her arms. "Look!" she calls out in Romanian, then switches to broken English for the stranger's benefit. "The boy lives. The angel lady heals." The effect is immediate. Several villagers lower their torches as they stare at the child who should be dead, but instead sleeps peacefully, his skin clear of corruption. Elena sees hope war with disbelief across weathered faces. But before she can capitalize on the moment, a new voice cuts through the crowd. Cold, authoritative, speaking Romanian with an accent she can't place. Elena doesn't understand the words, but she recognizes the tone of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. The villagers part reluctantly, revealing a figure that makes Elena's breath catch. The woman appears to be in her 50s, dressed in traveling clothes that suggest wealth and education. But it's her eyes that stop Elena cold, pale blue shot through with veins of silver, exactly like the corrupted pendants. "So," the woman says, switching to perfect English as her gaze fixes on Elena. The mountain hermit emerges at last. How convenient. Lucian moves with inhuman speed, placing himself between Elena and the stranger. His entire demeanor has shifted from wary cooperation to predatory threat. Katerina. The name drops into Elena's consciousness, like a stone into still water, creating ripples of recognition she can't quite grasp. But the woman's smile confirms that this meeting was planned, orchestrated, exactly like the children's simultaneous infection. "Hello, my king," Katerina purrs. "Did you really think you could hide your pet healer forever?" Elena's mind races through implications that make her stomach clench. If this woman knows about her work, about the cabin, about Lucian's involvement, then everything she's built has been compromised from the beginning. The children, Elena manages, forcing herself to focus on immediate needs despite the expanding web of revelation. Let me treat them. Whatever game you're playing. Game? Katerina laughs, the sound like breaking glass. This is no game, Doctor. This is a demonstration. She raises one pale hand, and every pendant around every child's neck flares with silver light. The bound forms convulse in unison, their synchronized screams piercing the night air. Elena watches in horror as the corruption spreads visibly beneath their skin, racing toward their hearts with supernatural speed. Stop it! Elena lunges forward, but Katerina's other hand produces a blade that gleams with the same silver corruption as the pendants. Cure them if you can, the woman challenges, but understand, for every child you save, I will mark 10 more. For every village you heal, I will corrupt 20. Your impossible blood is impressive, Dr. Thorne, but it is finite. My resources are not. Elena stares at the writhing children, at her pathetically small collection of vials, at the vast web of malice that has apparently been weaving itself around her mountain sanctuary for months. For the first time since discovering her blood's power, she feels truly helpless. The ordeal has begun, and she has no idea how to win. Elena drops to her knees beside the nearest child without another word, her hands already reaching for the vials in her medical bag. The boy, perhaps 6 years old, writhes against his bonds as the corruption races through his bloodstream like liquid fire. She can see it spreading beneath his translucent skin, reaching for his heart with supernatural hunger. Her fingers fumble with the vial's stopper. Too slow. The corruption pulses brighter with each heartbeat, and she knows from her careful studies at the cabin that once it reaches the heart, even her blood cannot reverse the damage. She has perhaps 30 seconds. Elena. Lucian's voice carries a warning she's never heard before. Look around you. She forces herself to lift her gaze from the dying child, taking in the full scope of Katerina's demonstration. 12 children bound around the pyre, dozens more villagers clustering at the edges of the firelight, and every single one of them wearing a pendant. Men, women, elderly grandparents, all marked with the same silver corruption that now blazes like stars against the darkness. The mathematical impossibility hits her like a physical blow. Even if she drains herself completely, even if she sacrifices her own life in the process, she might save 15 people, 20 at most. But Katerina's network extends far beyond this village, far beyond anything Elena's isolated mountain refuge prepared her to face. You see it now, Katerina observes with satisfaction. The futility of your small rebellions. Did you truly believe you could overturn centuries of careful work with a few bottles of blood? Elena's hands shake as she injects the cure into the boy's neck. His convulsions slow, the corruption retreating from his heart, but the victory tastes like ash. She saved one child while dozens more suffer around her, and somewhere beyond the firelight, hundreds of others wear pendants she cannot reach. Who are you? Elena demands, pulling out a second vial with desperate efficiency. What do you want? I am what your precious king made me, Katerina replies, her silver-veined eyes finding Lucian with something between hatred and perverse affection, one of his early experiments in immortality. Less successful than he hoped, more enduring than he intended. The revelation stops Elena's hands mid-motion. She looks between Lucian's rigid posture and Katerina's twisted smile, understanding beginning to form like a tumor in her mind. You're like him. Vampire. Not quite. I am what happens when the transformation fails and succeeds simultaneously. Immortal but not undead. Powerful but not complete. Lucian discarded me centuries ago when his techniques improved, but I have made excellent use of my exile. Elena forces herself to keep working, moving to the second child as Katerina speaks. But with each injection, the hopelessness grows. She's not fighting a disease anymore. She's fighting an intelligent enemy with unlimited resources and centuries of planning. The pendants, Lucian says quietly. You've been distributing them for months. Years, Katerina corrects. I embedded myself in the church networks, convinced priests these were blessed silver, protection against dark forces. Humans are so eager to believe in salvation, they never question the source. Elena's third vial shatters in her trembling fingers, the precious cure spilling into the frozen ground. 9 vials remaining, 9 lives she might save while watching dozens more perish. The arithmetic of triage becomes a crushing weight on her chest. But why? She gasps, struggling to focus on the 4th child. If you wanted revenge on Lucian— Revenge? Katerina laughs again. Oh, my dear doctor, you still don't understand. This isn't about revenge. This is about demonstrating the truth he refuses to accept, that some corruption cannot be healed, some darkness cannot be redeemed. She gestures toward the writhing children, the terrified villagers, the vast network of suffering that extends beyond the firelight. You represent hope, Elena Thorne, the possibility that even monsters like us might find salvation. But hope is the cruelest lie of all. Elena injects the 4th child, then the 5th, but her movements are becoming mechanical. Each saved life only emphasizes the magnitude of what she cannot save. Behind her, she can hear Andrei calling out names, relatives, friends, children, begging her to help them next. Choose quickly, Katerina suggests with mock sympathy. The corruption accelerates with each pulse of light. Soon even your miraculous blood won't suffice. Elena stares at her remaining vials, 5 left, then at the 8 children still convulsing around the pyre. Beyond them, the marked villagers await their turn to die. The boy she saved first stirs weakly, reaching for her with small fingers that should comfort her but instead highlight the impossibility of her situation. For 12 months, she has defined herself as someone who saves lives. But now, for the first time since discovering her blood's power, she must choose who dies. The pendant around the nearest child flares brighter, and Elena realizes that her year of isolation has not prepared her for this moment at all. She has become something worse than the helpless doctor who couldn't save her brother. She has become someone forced to decide which children deserve to live.